Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. So he was actually willing to spend untold thousands of dollars in lawyer fees suing a corporation over $2? Sometimes people are crazy. Customer threatened to sue if we didn't give him a Twix bar for free. So I, working in a really small grocery store, I still am, but due to some things going on where I haven't been transferred to another department, I'm considering quitting. By this point, I'd been there maybe half a year, and it was towards the end of the holiday rush. Our players, Kevin, Karen, me, Bunny, older sweet coworker, manager. Kevin had a travel backpack and wanted to grab some candy for the road, I'm assuming, so he puts a Twix bar down and it rings up like $3 or so. He begins to complain and throw a fit over it not being $1. Apparently, he picked it up from where someone had left it, right near other candy that was in fact $1. He said it was false advertising and that he needed his bar for that price. I was a young sapling at that point, still am, but and very shy, and he was yelling so loud every other cashier on the front end could hear. The woman working the register in front of me was Bunny, an older grandma-style lady. She and I had a good relationship, and it was her very last day. Kevin had begun to swear at me, and Bunny turned right around and told him to F off. Then she made a move towards him, literally just pointing at him. He started saying she had assaulted him. Not so. Later, when my manager came out to threaten to check the footage, he got real quiet. Once I called a code 2, aka help needed at my register, he started telling me to process the transaction and that he would take the bar for $3. I didn't let his card go through and instead let the manager come out to have a word with him. She told him that just because someone misplaced something back in the candy aisle, we couldn't comp the price for him. Yes, it should have been in the correct area, but we were busy that day and it was not our fault as cashiers. Kevin claimed that Bunny hurt him and my manager said she would check footage. He got quiet and then babbled about getting a lawyer and firing Bunny. It was her last day. How was she going to get fired? Anyway, in the end, he left. I felt shaken up because that was my worst customer experience at that point. He said he wasn't going to come back, but he did, and tried to con me out of more money than he was getting back. Haven't seen him since then, thankfully. Lawyers would definitely take that case. 1/3 of a Twix bar is a lot of chocolate. And our second story. Violate my 2 weeks conditions and then tell me to just work? This happened about 3 or 4 years ago. I worked for a big grocery store chain as a front-end cashier. I'd already had some problems with my company as they had promoted me to later rescind said promotion because of a lack of training hours. One of my assistant managers had also been harassing me, giving me all of the nightly duties and favoring daily position assignments for her friends. Finally fed up, I turned in my 2 weeks' notice. I take the 2 weeks' notice extremely seriously. Remember, especially in corporations, you're extremely replaceable. The point of a 2 weeks is to give your company time to conduct interviews, have labor for the written schedules, and fill your incoming vacancy. You were doing them a favor by not quitting on the spot. I submitted 2 separate 2-week notices, a formal one that didn't go into details and was meant as evidence of my resignation, and an informal one from my department manager explaining the poor treatment I'd experienced that led to my resignation. I specifically tell her not to schedule me with the bully assistant manager. The first week goes with little problem. 2 days into the second week, I arrive for my shift to find that the bully assistant manager has been scheduled as my manager on duty. Fan-effing-tastic. I seek out my department manager and question why she's violated my condition. She explains that she has spoken to my MOD and that everything will be fine because I'm here. So just work, okay? When I return to my department to receive my position, I see that I'm scheduled on the self-checkout station. This is by far the best station because you don't have to scan or bag, just help older people who struggle with the machines and check IDs for alcohol. Well, the bully assistant manager had commandeered my station because her knee's bothering her. I immediately smell bullcrap but say nothing as I head to my normal checkout lane. Well, surprise, surprise, an hour goes by and the bully's best friend has arrived for her shift. The bully's best friend's favorite position was easily the self-checkout station because, again, it's easy, and she was even lazier than me. She also used the quiet moments to shop for her groceries. Time theft, anyone? Suddenly, the bully's knee is feeling 100% better. She hops off the self-checkout, sends her best friend to the station, and hops on a normal lane. I am seething. Cue malicious compliance. Grocery stores have peak times, usually around 4 to 6 p.m. when people are getting off work. Working on a register during these times can be crazy. But I was also one of the faster workers, so it's no sweat. My manager tells me to just work. Sure, I'll work my butt off. I give every customer the friendliest customer service I can and work accurately but quickly. My lane moves 3 times faster than the other open lanes combined, and before I know it, the peak is ended. Once sticking around for another 10 or so minutes to confirm the peak is ended, I calmly shut down my register, clock out, and leave 4 hours before my shift was supposed to end. And I don't come back. Because I was in between high school and college at the time, I was one of the store's most important coverage workers. I worked almost any shift, usually during peak times, which meant that my manager had to scramble to fill every single 8-hour peak shift she'd given me for the rest of that week. No, you really can't get a ticket here. True story. In 1988, I was an extra on the movie Midnight Run with Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin. We were working at LAX overnight, and a bunch of extras and I were supposed to be travelers getting a ticket at, I think it was United? So United rented us one of their otherwise closed ticket counters at the far end of the airport, and one female extra was given a United uniform to wear during the shooting. So we extras lined up with our bags, suitcases, shoulder packs, just looking like we're waiting in line to check in, right? Well, after a number of takes, some guy walked up behind us and got in line. We knew he wasn't an extra because we knew all of our own, so we politely told him we were extras, we were shooting a movie, and he wouldn't be able to get a ticket. And we pointed out the real United counters where he could. Well, the line was moving fast. Of course, nothing needed to be done other than the extra United agent handing fake tickets to us. So he stayed in line, despite all of us telling him he was wasting his time. Finally, he got up to the extra playing the ticketing agent, and she said, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't give you a ticket. We're shooting a movie. I'm an extra, and this terminal isn't even open." Well, Mr. Mistake in Line became Mr. Entitled Moron and demanded a manager. An assistant director on the film heard him, wandered over, and asked what was going on. When the guy tried to bluster, we all told the AD that every one of us had told him he couldn't get a ticket in our line. The guy kept trying to argue when the AD just said, "Listen, they all told you couldn't get a ticket and you ignored them all? Stop harassing my actors and get over to United before I call security." They should have just given him a fake ticket and wished him good luck. And our last story. Karen rips open the doors on my ambulance, and it does not end well for her. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would do this. I'm a 30-year-old male and a paramedic. I've been in EMS for the past 8 years, and I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. "Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall?" etc. She stated that she has a pounding headache and that she remembers walking to bed and then waking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she's got a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agrees and we begin to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like. It's a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her and apologized and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we'd be leaving soon enough. The Karen neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital. I have errands to run tomorrow, and she needs to watch my kids." My lieutenant again reiterated that we were here for a medical emergency and that her health is more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we were going to be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance fly open, and who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yell at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yells back, "I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." She then starts trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient in it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the cot and couldn't get her out. Our patient says, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yells back at her and says, "You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke." My partner then hears the commotion and goes to the back of the ambulance. He pulls her off the cot and I slam and lock the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls too when it's at night. Because of where we were, it took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner runs back up to the driver's seat and starts heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said the entitled neighbor will just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gives her a heads up about these things. Small update. My contact at the hospital said that the patient does not have a bleed. She does, however, have a really nasty-looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She'll most likely be going home soon. Update. The patient's back home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of a bleed and she was discharged the next day. She filed an order of protection from the neighbor, and I'm really glad she did. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.